All right, so in this lecture, we're going to be painting some rough iron, really heavy, dark metal that's not smooth at all. It's not super reflective, but it does still have a little bit of a metallic sheen to it. Maybe something like a cauldron or like this old dented breastplate, something like that. That's just real rough, heavy metal. Okay, so same as the rest of the metals we've done so far, I like to keep it all on one layer, honestly, and we're going to select our shape layer so we're not painting outside the lines, and just out of personal preference, same with the last one, I'm going to start right about in the middle of that dark band there. And I'm going to use the same brush, the damp brush as we used last time, just because it has that really good texture. And in this one, what we're focusing on is that it's a little bit in between a matte object and a reflective object, in that we will still get a lot of the shadows and a lot of the base color will show through of the metal, which is this really dark, heavy gray. And on top of that, there will still be some reflective qualities to it, especially in the highlights, where it will get pretty reflective, but a lot of the colors will not come through. It will mostly just be the values. It's not going to be perfectly reflecting the whole environment like in the last two, at least not nearly as much. So you can see for the most part what we're painting is just the kind of the form, the shadows that make up the overall shape of this, that give us an indication of kind of how it's rounded. So we're going to work through that. At the bottom, though, you will see that there is a hint of the reflection of that dirt showing through. It's very subtle, and it's not a whole lot, and it's a mix of the reflection as well as just simply reflected light from the ground beneath. But we want to capture that and kind of get that up in the bottom there, bouncing up to one, help give it a little bit of that reflective metallic sort of feel without going too overboard, and help us define the form for that. So at this point I'm going to get my brush fairly large, and I'm going to be stamping in here. I'm not quite painting, it's more like dabbing this texture in here to help us get an idea of what this metal's like. Okay. And if you need to, I forgot to mention this in the other ones, but it's good to mention now as well. If you need to, you can totally use the warp tool, the liquefy tool, to move your paint around once you've kind of got it down. If you find something's not quite in the right spot and you want it to be shifted, totally fair game to be able to do that. All right, looks pretty good. Let's move up here to the main body. So for the iron, we want there to be, it's not just all one color gray, that is picking up slight variations from the environment around it, and even just the metal itself has variations of color in it, from cooler grays to warmer grays, and you want to get those variations in there. If you look on your color picker, it's going to go all the way from the blue range to the red range to orange and purple, and it's going to be all over the place, green, right? So picking up those subtle color variations are going to help the metal feel more realistic and alive. So you can see over here now we're in the red, even though it's really desaturated. It's basically almost just a gray with complete saturation taken out of it. The subtle, really subtle variances will really help it feel a lot more realistic and varied. And it's okay if you leave some, kind of how I just left that big spot there, we can turn that into like a dent later as we go through. All right. Let's go ahead and move now to the other side here. Do essentially the same thing. And on this side, we're going to have a nice bright highlight. Make sure that when you're highlighting these, if you look at the one on the left, you might initially think, okay, yeah, that highlight's white. And it might sort of look white compared to what's around it, but it's not actually white. It's more of a pretty dark gray, and I'll color pick it here in a second so you can see, but you need to take into account when you're painting what it is you're painting, because if you're painting a dark object, especially a dark object that's not entirely really reflective, the brightest it's going to get is going to be probably a mid-tone gray. And so when you're doing your highlights, you want to make sure you're not going crazy all the way up to the top of your value spectrum and going all the way white, because it's not going to look realistic, and it's going to change the texture of the object a lot. It's going to make it feel a lot smoother and shinier than it actually is. So the smoother your object is, the higher on the value scale your highlight's going to go, and the rougher it is, the lower it's going to go. So we color pick it over here. You can see, like I said, it's totally a mid-gray, but it feels a lot brighter because the surrounding area is so dark. So just make sure that you're not going too bright. I'll show you what it would look like if we did do that. It would start to look really too glossy. Then let's get a little brighter here. All right. And then to show you, if we went all the way white, it wouldn't even, it almost doesn't even look real because of how bright it is, and it starts to make it look way shinier than what we want it to be. Like, we want this to be a rough iron. So keep that in mind when you're painting on how bright you can get your highlights without it starting to feel like a different texture. All right, that looks pretty good. Let's do the this middle crease here. Since this one has a little bit more damage and wear to it, we're gonna showcase a little of that by putting a few extra shadows that we didn't put in the other ones where it's been dented and creased. For example, well, let's go ahead and finish this middle part first, and then we can start doing some of that other stuff. So get our bright color here. Okay. And then this one, we're gonna have a little bit of a seam in it, in the metal, and have that go ahead and continue over there on the other side. And then right in the middle there, we'll have it get really dark. All right, excellent. Go ahead and lighten up and touch up just a few spots. Excellent. Now we can go ahead and add some of these dents that we were talking about. So like this over here, we can refine a little bit more. Get our reflection here along the bottom side where it turns upwards. Maybe it's a little bit too bright, so we'll tone it down just a bit. Okay. Let's say that I don't want to get too bright. we have maybe like a hole. We could do a hole like we have in this one over here. So we draw that out and get some dark grays, especially up here along the perimeter where it looks like the metal has sort of been punched inwards. And then some of the lighter gray around here. And then right at the tip of it, we'll pick this color here, get it pretty bright there, picking up that highlight. And then let's do inside here of the shoulders and the collar. Oh, and then we need to finish up the collar as well. Okay, and then the collar is essentially the same thing as all the other ones. Just a little less reflective. All right, and there we go. That is how you can paint rough iron. So just like the other ones, your assignment is going to be to, you'll have the example on the left to look at, and your job is to replicate it on the right, and basically follow along, post in the Q&A. So that's it for this lecture. I'll see you guys in the next one.